I'm pleased to welcome today's guest, a retired Air Force General Officer turned private pilot and now Managing Director for Victory Strategies, Dave Hicks. And welcome to the show, Dave Hicks, our special guest today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Amy. It's great to be here. Great to have a chance to chat a little bit.
That's right, a Victory Strategies teammate, and we've been following you. Obviously, the past year have been amazing work that you're doing, and we'll get to that in the future. But I want to take people down your career journey, which has just been fascinating. You've been, a leader in many scenarios, a coach, a mentor, and making an impact all along the way, everywhere you go. So here at Victory Podcast, we talk about life, leadership, and the journey that gets us there. So let's rewind and take us back to your first, planting the seed of your interest in joining the Air Force, because I'll tell everyone off the top, you're a retired U.S. Air Force General, Brigadier General, and you've had just an amazing career. So let's take us back to your early days when you wanted to join the Air Force.
Yeah, absolutely. I just got back from about 3 weeks in Tennessee, which is where I was born and raised, a small town in Northwest Tennessee, just a few thousand people in it. Quiet little place away from definitely rural, I guess is the best way of saying it. And didn't really come from a military family. I'd say lower middle class family, just kind of working, making our way through there. And in high school, I guess it was really probably sophomore, junior year, kind of realized that, I had to get a scholarship. I was going to have to get a scholarship, or I was going to have to work my way through college. It was not really going to be an opportunity for a free ride, with my parents being able to pay my way all the way through school. And, I started really getting fascinated with flying, and seeing a lot of the aircraft. We were about 60 miles from Fort Campbell, so we were underneath a couple of the training areas where they would fly in and out. So I'd see helicopters and C-130s, and every now and then some fighters that would be flying around low level. And that's kind of what piqued my interest, I guess you could say. And amazingly enough, I got selected to the Air Force Academy. It was a heck of a challenge with a knee injury my senior year in football, to get medically qualified and get all the waivers done in time to go. And the first time I ever got on an airplane was the day I got on the airplane to go to the Air Force Academy. So that was the first time I actually flew in an aircraft, was right after I graduated high school, and I was on my way to the Air Force Academy.
That's great. A whole new world out there, and you're on your way to the academy. And your passion for flying it continues to this day, but you obviously graduated and then just started knocking out your assignments and flying and serving in combat zones. Can you give us some of your highlights of what assignments that really shaped you in an important way?
Yeah, I think while I was at the Air Force Academy during one of the summer programs, went to they take you, we go sent to 2 or 3 different Air Force bases, and we stay there for about a week, and we see all different types of jobs that are being done in career fields on the base. So you get a chance to see the real Air Force while you're a cadet. And so one of those locations I went to was Myrtle Beach Air Force Base, where they had A-10s. And that was, when I saw them, they were doing an exercise. They had the A-10s parked back in taxiways and trees, and they were doing an exercise simulating operating over in Europe. And so they were, all living out literally by their airplanes and tents, and, working 24/7 with the exercise. And so seeing it and getting to see the A-10 and the guys and how they do the mission, that became immediately the airplane I wanted to fly. And lucky enough, went to pilot training and was able to get that. And then it was off and running from there. And I know in one of my big tours, is my very first one as a lieutenant, I had a great squadron commander, Wiley Green was his name. And some of the best advice he gave me, because you're going to always do jobs you don't want to do, but he said, you're going to do some crappy jobs. Just, you're going to be assigned to it. That's how the military works. But he said, bloom where you're planted. So no matter where you go, no matter what job you're assigned to, do it to the best of your abilities, and your work ethic will get noticed, and you'll eventually get to go do more things or more jobs that are more to your liking. So certainly that very first tour flying A-10s in Louisiana, then probably a little bit further down the road, another key tour for me was at Nellis Air Force Base when I was in the 422 Test Squadron, and went to weapons school while I was there. So, the easiest way to explain it, U.S. Air Force Weapons School is kind of like the Air Force version of Top Gun School, except it's almost 6 months in length. And going there, I think probably that 6 months was the hardest 6 months of my career, just because it's such intense training. But the discipline and everything that goes along with it, I came out of that feeling like I could do pretty much anything that I set my head to. So that going to weapons school really, I think, defined or helped define my path and what I wanted to do further down in the career, further out in my career.
Wonderful. I mean, the pilots in, the military just take such huge risks every time you go up in the air. And so kind of a metaphor for your life and your leadership abilities and inspiring the next generation, propelled you, and, some great assignments. And then what year did you retire from active duty?
I retired in 2019. Was actually 30 years and 1 day after my commissioning at the Air Force Academy. So kind of a nice bit of symmetry there. As far as I was concerned, I didn't get in the Air Force to be a general or a senior officer or anything like that. In fact, I said it throughout early my career, if I could make it 20 years and have a chance to be an operations officer or squadron commander, I would consider that a successful career. And so I reached that point in 2009, 2008, 2009. A couple of days like, well, so what's your career goal now? I said, well, as long as I'm coming to work and I'm having fun more days than I'm not, and I feel like I'm making a difference, I'll stay in and keep doing what I'm doing. And so lo and behold, that got me another 10 years of worth of time in the Air Force to get me to that 30-year point, and two combat tours in command in that last 10 years also over in Afghanistan. So like I said, I've enjoyed every minute of it. Wouldn't take anything in the world for it. Learned so many things, still have so many great friends I've worked with, still talk to all the time, that are located all around the world. So just grateful for the opportunity, really.
Yeah, I tell people 20 years goes by in a heartbeat, but then 30 years also goes by, especially when you're in a high up tempo, deployed to combat zones. It's just one back-to-back deployments, and then it's just such an intense experience. Time is just either dragging, but then you look back and you go, where did the time go, when you're just so committed to a mission like you were, and especially in Afghanistan. And when you retired and you followed closely the events that were happening in Afghanistan, let's take us back to last summer, and you were watching very closely as to what was happening in Afghanistan. I find this fascinating because we'll talk about your organization, but give us your thoughts about what was going on in Kabul, what your gut was telling you about what was about ready to happen. I mean, we all knew deep down what was going to happen, but we just could never imagine what actually was going on. And so give us your thoughts on what you were feeling when you were watching the news with the at what was happening at the airport, especially.
Yeah, it was a little bit, last summer was weird. Early in the summer, I did a couple of reporters reached out to me and wanted to do or did a couple of articles regarding the Taliban assassinating Afghan Air Force pilots, and what was going on and how they could possibly prevent it, and how I thought, or what I thought, the Afghan Air Force would be able to do once we pulled out of there late in the summer. And so, I'd done a couple articles, was kind of watching things go downhill was talking to some of the other advisors. A quick background, let me back up. I was the commander of NATO TAC Air, so all of the U.S. and allied forces that were building the Afghan Air Force and flying with them from the summer of 2016 to 2017. So lived, ate, slept with our Afghan counterparts, 24/7 for that year that was over there. And so, had a personal attachment to a lot of these pilots, especially the A-29 pilots, since that's who I flew with the majority of the time. And so August came around and it started going downhill really fast. And I don't think anybody expected, just like you said, anybody expected it to fall and fail as fast as it did. The surrounding parts of Afghanistan and a lot of the major cities, the Taliban were kind of overrunning or taking. And, we figured, there was kind of the thought that Kabul would fall to the Taliban at some point. But I don't think, again, almost nobody thought it would be with that speed that it happened. And so I'll never forget, it was August the 13th. I was home in Tennessee with my parents and was driving back to the airport. And I got a phone call and a text from a couple of former advisors that I worked with, and they were still doing the advising mission as contractors. And they were asking for help and advice on what they should tell our Afghan counterparts, because they were reaching out to the advisors asking if the U.S. had any plans to evacuate any of the pilots or their families or anything. And of course, there was no plans by our government to do anything to help them. And so, really, essentially that weekend that Kabul kind of fell and the chaos started, we started kind of gathering up a group of former advisors, from all around the country, and we started setting up shop in our kitchens or living rooms, wherever. And we were using a messaging app, primarily using a messaging app called Signal, that's fairly secure, to work with our Afghan counterparts to try to get them to the airport and on some of the evacuation flights. In the course of that happening also, a lot of Afghan Air Force members flew their aircraft out of Mazar Sharif and Kabul into Tajikistan and to Uzbekistan to try to save the aircraft and keep them from the Taliban. And not knowing what was going to happen, the assumption was eventually they'd be able to come back to Afghanistan. Well, there was I think it was a total of about 64 aircraft and helicopters total, and about, it was around 500 folks total between the two locations. They were immediately apprehended, pretty much put in jail in both of those countries and locked up while they tried to figure out what was going on. So that didn't obviously go as planned with regards to those folks. They had no idea what was going to happen next. And so the advisors, we kind of stood up a group and we went to work trying to get them out in Kabul for the ones that were stuck there, try to get the families out, started engaging with the media, members of Congress, talking about the situation. Did a whole lot of media interviews to put pressure on the State Department to get them out. And then we also, again, we're working to get folks out on the evacuation flights and get them around the Taliban. So doing some pretty crazy stuff in those 2 weeks. It was pretty much 24/7 being up, because it's 12 hours difference from here to Afghanistan. So a lot of times when we needed to do stuff the most, it was the middle of the night here because it was the middle of the day there. So we always had somebody in our little group of 40 or so advisors that were volunteering. Somebody was up and being able to talk to and move the Afghans 24/7. Ultimately, we wound up getting out. There was other groups of advisors doing this for other aircraft types. I was working primarily with the A-29s to start. There was other groups doing the same thing that were advisors for other types of aircraft. And ultimately, we wound up getting out almost 1,000 people, all totaled, because we eventually got the folks out of Uzbekistan and Tajikistan also, and got them evacuated eventually here to the United States. So now we've got about 1,000 total here in the U.S. There's as many as 5,000 that are still in Afghanistan as far as family members and Air Force members that we're trying to keep alive and trying to get out. It's been a kind of grueling, grinding year, to say the very least, with I'll say marginal success getting folks out, but we have had some victories in the last year. The organization that we wound up standing up and getting a lot of, it's all volunteer organizations, called Operation Sacred Promise. And again, it's an all volunteer group of mostly veterans and active duty folks, but there's a number of civilians that have come in with that don't have a military affiliation that wanted to just help. Also, in the course of doing that last year, I stood up a foundation called Operation Sacred Promise Foundation, and its primary purpose, in fact, now it's evolved to really its sole purpose, is to try to get as many Afghan pilots pilot training here in the U.S. so we can get them good jobs and good paying jobs, so they can take care of their family, which in many cases their families are still back in Afghanistan. So it's not a cheap endeavor. So there's only so many we're going to be able to get through based on how fundraising goes, and now you have things like Ukraine and other issues that dominate the news, and so makes fundraising a little bit more difficult. But we're doing a lot of advocacy work behind the scenes with the government, and then a lot of work with other organizations and nonprofits to try to get these guys and gals pilot training so they can get their certificates that they need here in the U.S. to be able to hopefully go fly and get good jobs here in the States, which we have had some success. We've got one guy flying and fighting fires up in Montana with a firefighting agency up there, or company, and we've got a couple more that just finished their pilot training this last week, which brings us up to five or six. And we got job interviews lined up for those guys, and we're getting ready to put some more into training here soon.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm going to re-emphasize the name of the organization is Operation Sacred Promise, and the website. Tell us the website.
It is opsacredpromise.org. It's very easy, all one word.
Okay, we'll put that out in the show notes as well. But for people who don't understand, the cultivating and the developing of an Afghan pilot was just an extraordinary endeavor through the 20 years. And so for you to take this on as, out of your own time and endeavors, it extends your service long after the 30 years of service that you gave to our country, but rather providing a service that our country is not providing, to continue that promise of, we're going to train you, we're going to make you successful. So here we are with not just pilots, but we've got commandos and other interpreters and other special categories of people in America who are Afghans. And just so how it touches you, if any Americans out there who've ever been to Afghanistan know that we were never at war with the Afghan people or the Afghan government, but and then these people are tremendous, good-natured people for the most part, who just want like everything that we want. And so some of the best people and kind-hearted people. And so you guys have taken it upon yourselves to help and assist these little diamonds in the rough in order to get them training that they need in order to, integrate with our culture here in America. And I'm sure they're grateful for that.
Yeah, it's I always tried to, especially last year when everything was going on, I tried to make sure and emphasize these are the good guys. They, for the most part, all of them that we were working with trained and flew at some point here in the United States, going through their pilot training. They all know English. They're all, most all of them are actually fairly fluent in English. You have to speak English to fly. That's the international language of aviation. So, they're ready-made citizens that are ready to, be productive to society over here. If we can get them everything they need to really just get started. And like I said, they're the good guys. They were the ones that were trying to actually protect their country. They were the ones that, kind of had the Western values over the 20 years that we were building their Air Force. And really, between the commandos that you mentioned, their special forces, and the Afghan Air Force, those were the two big success stories for the Afghan military and the Afghan government of what was being done over there. Is those were the two best examples of our training, or the training that was being done for these guys. And then, just essentially had the rug pulled out of them, or out from underneath them there in a moment's notice.
Yes, and firsthand knowledge with the commandos. I lived on a small, secure compound with commandos. I was assigned to a command under Joint Special Operations Command, and I had no hesitancy, no doubt in my mind that it was safe, it was fine. We lived with them, and I've still stayed in touch with many of them, and they're still desperate to leave the country. But for people out there, it's just a unique experience, and your service continues on even after retiring just a few years ago. And so, let's talk about your leadership philosophy. We want to know really just your top 3 lessons for really a successful life and in business and personal relationships. What are the top 3 things that you would tell, let's say, your 25-year-old self, or someone out there who's listening, that what has really helped you and you cling to that to be happy and successful in life?
Yeah, I think for me, there's a couple things, and they're really simple things, because there's so many different types of leadership styles, leadership mantras. There's a few things that if you don't do, I think, day to day, you will have a very difficult time in life, no matter what it is, and especially when it comes to leadership. The first one, when you sent the sent the a couple of questions and whatnot, I always have to think through, like what I want to say on some of these kind of questions and answers. And so the first one is smile and laugh a lot, because if you don't, I promise you, you're going to have a tough time as a leader. I tried to go in as a commander. I always tried to go in the office every day and put the office at ease. And anytime any of the units I was going to, I'd try to go and I'd try to put them at ease by laughing, cutting up with the youngest airmen, trying to show them that I'm a regular person too. Yes, I'm the one that's going to have to probably make some decisions that you're not going to like, or not, it's not going to be popular, but we're going to laugh a little bit while we do this to show that, hey, I'm no different than anybody else. I'm no more special. I'm no less special. You're no more special. You're no less special. I'm going to treat you as if I would treat any other individual, no matter what rank they have, no matter what they do. So for me, that was one of the biggest things I've learned over life, is if you're not smiling and you're not laughing, you probably need to change something up, probably need to do something a little bit different, whatever it is you're doing in life at that time. The second one for me also is the same thing. I think it helps in so many ways, is exercise. Even if it hurts, exercise. I've had 2 knee surgeries, a shoulder surgery. I should probably have another shoulder surgery on my other shoulder. Going to the gym is sometimes painful, but I found out when I don't exercise, not only does my body tell me and give me feedback, my mind and my kind of mental well-being gives me a little bit of feedback too. If I'm not staying in a good routine, not keeping the body and mind, I guess, in motion all the time, or as much as I possibly can. And I think that's been a big thing. Again, same thing going through career. I would try to always emphasize and try to work out and do physical training with the young airmen, and be the old man out there that, hopefully I'd make them try to keep up with me a little bit, instead of it being the other way around all the time. So, again, that's part of that leading by example. So if you're expecting your organization to be healthy, whether it's mentally healthy, physically healthy, or whatever, you need to be the one that's ideally out front doing that. I would say is a very key point. And then the last thing is, I always told my commanders, you're going to make mistakes. I expect you to make mistakes. I will be disappointed if you don't make mistakes, because it means you're probably not taking enough risk or not being aggressive enough as a leader. And I didn't like or didn't want risk-averse commanders underneath me. It's not the mistake, it's what you do and how you respond after making a mistake that defines you as a person. So if I make a mistake and I try to either cover it up and don't tell anybody, that says a lot about one's character if somebody does that. If I make a mistake and then repeat the same mistake 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times again and again and again, then I'm a little bit worried that you're observing mistakes and people always say lessons learned. I say, well, there's lessons learned, there's lessons observed. And if you repeat the same mistake over and over again, then it's a lesson observed. If you actually make a change in how you do business or how you make decisions, then it's a lesson learned at that point, because you've made a change in your activity, or you made a change in your decision tree for it. So for me, I wanted and I encouraged commanders to be aggressive, tell me what they're doing, but be aggressive with their leadership. But if you make a mistake, I expect you to make one. It's how you respond that will define you as a person. And that's not just as a leader, but I mean, that really is, I think, in everything you do in life. Every time you get up in the morning, we're going to make mistakes, whether it's investing, whether it's, doing things around the house, whether it's sometimes bad career decisions, whatever it may be. You're going to make mistakes, but it's how you respond to those that's going to define you both. If you're in leadership, it's going to define you as a leader. And then it's also going to, in a lot of ways, define you as a person, how you respond and how you pick yourself up once you make a boo-boo, because it's going to happen.
So Dave, let's talk a little bit about developing strategies. And this is something that your area of expertise and you'd like to share. We'll be seeing more of it in the leadership library on victory strategies, but give us a little sample and a taste of what you're going to be discussing and talking about.
Yes. So my last job before I retired, I was the director of strategy and wargaming for the U.S. Air Force at the Pentagon. So, I'd done strategy and developed strategies, different types of military strategies throughout my career in different commands and different jobs I was in. But then it really culminated with being the director of strategy for the U.S. Air Force my last couple of years in the Air Force before I retired. And I saw and tried to take a lot of those lessons learned and transfer them over, as I do a lot of reading about organizational structure and organizational strategies that are non-military in nature. And I was kind of surprised at the number of companies, both large and small, that either ultimately fail or they struggle. And then when they kind of go look for the reasons why and the lessons learned from it, it's oftentimes they either didn't have a sound strategy in place for where their business should be going, or they had developed a strategy but did a poor job of implementing it. So they did a poor job of communicating it. They did a poor job of coming back and making decisions based off of the strategy that they had laid out for their company or for their business or for their organization, whatever it may be. And inside of organizations, you always have smaller strategies that hopefully fit under the bigger organizational grand strategy, if you will. So, if I'm running a business and it's, I'm selling, I don't know, say I'm selling cars, I've probably got a marketing department. They probably need to have a strategy. I've got an operations, maintenance department. They need to have a strategy that fits under how the overall structure of the business works. And I've probably got a sales department. So they probably need to have a strategy that fits also underneath the grander strategy of the entire business. And so what I see happens a lot of times, and I would even ask in my commands, I would go to the youngest folks in the organization and I would ask if they knew or understood what the strategy was or what the mission was of the squadron or of the group or of the wing that I was in command of. And if they couldn't answer it, I didn't blame them. I usually blame myself, actually, for doing a poor job of communicating who we are and what I think we need to be doing as an organization. And so I always thought it was incumbent on me to make sure that I communicated that properly and pushed it down properly through the commanders and leadership. So what I want to do, or what I'm planning on doing, is another podcast on developing strategy. and going to use just an example of a small business or somebody wanting to start a small business and how they should think through it, or how the military thinks through it at least. And then, this is just going to translate over to non-military or business way of thinking, hopefully. And then after that, write an article that will go into implementation of strategy and how you measure whether you're being successful or not successful.
Bring us up to date on what other organizations or interests that you have. You're living in the area of Las Vegas, Nevada, and you're on the road quite a bit, so it makes it hard for a routine for your workouts. But tell us what other projects you're into.
Yeah, so staying busy out here. I'm a pilot, private pilot for a business owner out here in Las Vegas. So I fly him and his family. We stay pretty regular on the road as far as a fair amount of travel. But the good thing about that is it gives me the flexibility to do things, like we're talking about here right now, and having a chance to be with the great team at Victory Strategies, because I have when we're not flying, I have the free time and the ability to take on other endeavors and work on other things, just like the foundation, Operation Sacred Promise. One other foundation that I'm on the board with right now is team5.org. And it's a really neat organization. It's kind of, think of it as like a Doctors Without Borders. So we've got doctors from around the world that come on board to do missions in some of the most remote places. So most of these doctors are either ex-military or they have specialized training in doing remote medicine. So for example, we just finished a 10-day mission to Guatemala. We had a team of 6 doctors down there, and they were going into Mayan villages, some of which had never seen a doctor before. One of the coolest comments was from an 86-year-old lady that told Eric, he's the CEO. Eric said, "Well, when's the last time you've seen a doctor?" And she goes, "You're the first doctor I've ever seen." And she was 86. So that's neat. We do we try to do 2 to 4 missions per year, depending on our funding and how things go with that. We did Nepal early in the year this year, and then we did Guatemala. Next year, we're hoping to do Peru. And we may do another Asian country. We're just not sure yet. We're talking to some governments in different places to possibly do that. One other neat thing in the Guatemala trip is we actually carried a vet. And so while we were treating, I didn't get to go on the trip, but while they were treating all of the families in these small towns, the vet was taking care of all their dogs, which a lot of the dogs obviously needed, some of the most basic things that we take for granted as far as shots and stuff like that. So it's pretty rewarding to see that. It's pretty rewarding to see the footage and see what they do to take care of folks that otherwise would never get any medical treatment.
Wonderful. Well, we'll put that in the show notes as well. So your service doesn't end with a retirement. You have a full schedule of leading and sharing your expertise. But we really appreciate you coming on Victory Podcast, and Victory Strategies is very lucky to have you on the team. So keep up the great work, and we'll do another touch point and talk about strategy in the near future. So thank you so much, Dave Hicks. We'll see you again soon. Thank you so much.
Sounds great. Thanks. We'll see you guys out there.
Check out other editions of the Victory Podcast. Go to the Leadership Library on the Victory Strategies website.